Hello, everybody. We are going to talk today about the changes that are required for use on Wednesday, July 1st. And we're going to talk about what's changed in the contract and we're going to talk about what's changed in the listing agreement. As you guys know, there have been a lot of industry changes in the past couple years, and we're kind of moving and grooving with it, right, as the best we can. And we wanted to put out this video now because the managers and I are already starting to get a lot of questions about using these new forms. And obviously, since they're going into effect on July 1, you guys need to have the basics of how you need to be operating going forward. The new forms, today we're just going to talk about the residential forms, the 1-to-4 contract and the residential listing agreement to sell. There are other changes to farm and ranch and commercial that are not applicable here. So this is just applies to residential. So file that away. And we'll talk a little bit about what exactly has changed. So as you know, we've been kind of moving in the direction of how we handle our commission discussions and um, how it's discussed with our sellers and buyers. And the Texas Realtors Association has removed the opportunity for us to offer a co-broke commission in our listing agreement. So what that means is that we're no longer going to sit down with our sellers and say, my fee is 3% plus 395, and a buyer most likely that's represented is going to ask you to pay their broker their fee. So we can agree here to offer it up front so that I can promote the property with that commission when a buyer and their agent ask if commission is included. And we would agree on a number and say, this is my fee. What would you like to offer to the buyer's agent? That co-broke commission is going away. It's no longer contemplated in our new listing agreement form. So, and we're going to go over all of this. I'm just giving you the lay of the land right now. So basically, the way we're going to get our buyers brokers compensation is by writing it directly into the offer in paragraph 12. And the TREC forms have kind of changed recently, and now there's the most recent change, which was the May 2026 change, which is also going into effect for required use on Wednesday, July 1st. Um, Requires us to put the compensation in there for the buyer's broker if we want buyer's broker compensated by the seller. So that's what that looks like. We're first going to look at the 1-to-4 contract itself. And this is the new 1-to-4 paragraph 12, which was regarding settlement expenses. And you can see, unfortunately, it jumps between page 6 and page 7. So we have this gap here, but this is paragraph 12, expenses as it was. And you can see here, I've circled, this is the form you need to be using. The May 4th, 2026 is the current 1-to-4 form that's required on July 1st. So that's the one that should be in ReChat and Zip forms for you to use going forward as you write offers. And so this is the paragraph about brokerage compensation. It looks very different than what we've been dealing with. Not very different, but somewhat different. It basically says compensation is not set by law. It's fully negotiable, right? That was part of the lawsuit. We needed to educate our consumers better. Each party shall pay their respective brokers pursuant to the terms of their obligations, meaning, you have a buyer's rep where the buyer agrees that the buyer's broker will be paid a certain amount. You have a listing agreement that says the seller is going to get paid a certain amount. That's what those documents separately say now. So that's what this is saying. It says the contributions under 12B1 and 12B2 shall be applied to those obligations, but they won't change the obligation. So if you have a buyer's rep that says 3% and the seller only agrees to pay 2%, then the your buyer is obligated to pay that additional 1%. And I will tell you that SLS loan officers are kind of prepared to have those discussions with buyers and talk about how to cover that number if the seller doesn't agree to pay the full amount. So they're great people to be referring your buyers to. But this is what this looks like. If you want the seller to pay your buyer broker compensation, you need to write that in 12B1. The seller will pay, 3% of the sales price toward brokerage compensation owed by the buyer to the buyer's broker, meaning the amount of money that the buyer agreed to pay the buyer broker in their buyer's rep agreement will now be paid on behalf of the seller. So I'm now be paid by the seller. So that's that. There's also this 12B2, which is kind of a new provision for that, in which case the buyer might be agreeing to pay some of the seller's broker's compensation. I think that's pretty unusual, and you likely won't be using that blank very much. for now, the way that we're kind of operating. Who knows how the industry will change. But right now, 12B1, your buyer's broker compensation needs to be filled out to ask the seller to pay your buyer's broker compensation because it's no longer offered through the listing agreement. And these are things you guys are just going to have to talk through with your agents on the other side of your deals, right? And of course, we're always here to help you too, so don't be shy. But I wanted to show you guys that so you can see what the offers and contracts should look like. Again, it's the May 4th, 2026 form is the current one that's required for use after July 1st. Okay, so now this is the residential real estate listing agreement. These are the pages. There's old forms, these two. There's an old form from January of this year. There's an old form of from August of 2024, and we still kind of see both of those, which we should not be. And this is the new form. You'll see that the new form is dated June 15th, 2026. It's required for use on July 1st as well. So if you have a listing agreement that have one of these, they're not like void, they're not good anymore, but when you get to a transaction, you're going to have to probably amend the listing agreement to address compensation, which is what we're talking about today. So again, if you have these old ones, you're going to need to amend it. We're going to talk about the amendments next. But in this new form, let's just talk about what your listings need to look like going forward. And it's actually pretty straightforward for you guys, which is, you sit down with your seller and the discussion you have is, I charge 3% or whatever it is you guys choose to charge, plus my $395 administration fee, and in the event that a buyer comes and is unrepresented, I'm going to charge this much as well because it's extra work for me or because I'm going to have to do X, Y, and Z for them. Obviously, you don't represent them, but you're going to have to let them in. You're going to have to facilitate. So I just put 3% in there. We are not saying you need to charge 3%. That's a negotiation between you and your seller. Like, what is fair if the buyer is unrepresented? So now it's pretty clear about how this compensation works. 3%, an additional X%, whatever you decide to put in there, if the buyer is unrepresented, plus your administration fee. So that's what your listing agreement should look like going forward in a residential deal. Um, one thing, I'm trying to get this done efficiently. In this video, I'm talking about the mechanics of these forms. I'm not talking about the strategy, the discussion, like how are we going to actually have these conversations with our sellers and buyers, what's going to change. We are going to talk about that. I encourage you to come to all of your Monday morning meetings and your huddles so you can get that content as well. But we wanted to just push out the information about filling out the good old paperwork properly. So that is what the listing paperwork looks like. Now, remember, we have these two old listing agreements here, these old forms from 2024 and January of 2026 that might need to be amended. If you get an offer, on the new contract that has buyer broker compensation in it, and you had a listing that had, buyer broker compensation in it, you need to amend it. So you'll see now to make it extra fun, there's an old listing amendment form and a new one. The old one is from January. We do not want to use this form. We want to use this new one, and they have different names. It's still Form 1404, so you really shouldn't be able to find this one anywhere, but make sure you're using the one that's 1404 from June of 2026 that's called the Amendment to Residential Listing Exclusive Right to Sell. That's the one we want to use. And then this is where you change paragraph 5 of the listing agreement to just cover what you're getting paid as the listing agent because the buyer broker compensation is going to be in the contract, right? Or it's not going to be in the contract if the seller says no and the buyer's going to have to pay it. But generally speaking, it's going to be in the contract. So that is what that looks like. Make sure you're using the June 15th, 2026 form to amend your listing. If you get an offer on the new form that has buyer broker compensation in it, but your listing had buyer broker compensation in it, because that needs to go away. So this is what this looks like when it's properly filled out, right? So the broker's fee in 5A is changed to 3%, meaning you're going to get paid, the seller's going to get paid 3%. If the buyer is unrepresented, that's the number you guys can negotiate in there. And then your fee. And of course, you're making sure you're using the June form. So that's really, what that looks like when you have to amend a listing, one of the old forms to match the new form. So the last situation I'm going to talk about is the situation where your listing already contemplates that your seller is only paying the buyer broker compensation. So you remember when this all came out and I told you guys how my husband would be one of those people that was like, no, I'm not offering buyer broker compensation up front. Like I will pay you and then we will decide what the buyer broker makes based on the offer, based on the quality of the agent, like blah, 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 right? So we would have filled out our listing agreement this way, meaning it only contemplated the listing broker getting paid. There was no fee for compensation with the other broker. But if we get into a negotiation and the offer's not great and the numbers aren't working and my seller needs to net a certain amount and they say, look, I know we said we were going to pay you three in the listing, but really we're going to pay you two now, and I agree to that to get the deal done, then we have to amend our listing, right? And what we would do, you can see 5B1A said 3%. And this new form, this new amendment form, does not contemplate this specific scenario we're talking about. So you're going to have to just write it in. Paragraph 5B1A is now changed that broker will pay 2%, not 3% anymore. We're not changing 51B. The admin fee is still in there, so you don't have to change that. You just say 5B1A is changed to 2%. And then you are covered there. So that is the short version, the quick version of the change in these forms. And I know it's a lot. I don't want you guys to feel overwhelmed. I just wanted to give you this quick lay of the land to make sure you're using the right forms and that you know how to fill them out. And if you have questions as you're writing listings or having to amend listings as you do deals using the old listing agreement forms where you had co-broke compensation in there, please call us. Like all of the managers and I are available to help you. This is very doable. You guys are the best of the best. We're going to go through this again. I know I talk fast and I was trying to make this video not too long for you guys. Um, we're going to go over this again on the Monday morning meeting, so please be sure to attend. There's always good content there. And we're also going to talk about like the strategy and the conversations and the scripts of how to have these conversations with your clients under these new forms, since this is a pretty big shift, right? From the Texas way of offering co-broke compensation, where we negotiate upfront with the seller to offer some buyer broker conversation, to the new way where we're only talking about what we are going to get paid as the listing broker. Of course, we will have to prepare the seller for the fact that most offers we will receive will include some compensation for the buyer's brokers. They need to factor that in as they're netting that out. And of course, the title companies can help you prepare, especially Momentous, our estimated net sheets, and you should build in some buyer broker compensation just so that the sellers have an idea of what their costs might look like. So that's all I got. Hopefully that's helpful. I don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed. Please don't be hesitant to reach out to any of us. And we will see you guys on the Monday morning meeting and in the office to talk about this more. Thanks so much.